The scent of stale coffee and industrial-grade disinfectant clung to Liam O'Connell's cheap polyester uniform. It was his second job, a ghost shift waiting tables at the exclusive Onyx Lounge in the private aviation terminal of Westchester County Airport. By day, he stocked shelves at a grocery store. By night, he served overpriced champagne and miniature quiches to people who wouldn't look him in the eye. Every dollar was a drop in the cavernous bucket of his daughter Lily's medical bills. Her heart, so full of life and laughter, was a fragile, failing muscle, and the experimental surgery she needed cost more than a house. He balanced a tray, the porcelain cups rattling with the slight tremor in his hand. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours. His mind was a frantic calculator, tallying hours worked against mounting debts. A picture of Lily, her smile missing 2 front teeth, was tucked into his wallet, a constant aching reminder of why he pushed his body to its breaking point. "Excuse me, waiter." The voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet murmur of the lounge like shattered glass. It belonged to Isabella Vance, CEO of Vance Global, a titan of industry with a reputation as ferocious as her company's stock performance. She was on her phone, a sleek black rectangle pressed to her ear, her other hand tapping impatiently on a polished mahogany table. Her face, framed by a severe black bob, was a mask of cold fury. "I ordered an espresso macchiato 10 minutes ago. Is it your ambition to die of old age before you deliver it?" she snapped, not bothering to look up from her phone. "My apologies, Ms. Vance. Right away," Liam said, his voice low and weary. He turned, retrieved the cup from the service bar, and approached her table. As he leaned in to place it down, his foot caught on the leg of her oversized leather briefcase, which she had carelessly left in the walkway. The tray tilted. Time seemed to slow as the cup slid, a small white vessel of impending disaster. He tried to correct, his tired muscles screaming in protest, but it was too late. The cup toppled, and a splash of scalding brown liquid erupted across the pristine cream silk of her blouse. A collective gasp echoed through the lounge. Isabella Vance went rigid. She slowly lowered her phone, her grey eyes cold as a winter storm, locking onto Liam. The fury on her face was no longer contained. It was a volcanic eruption. "You incompetent fool," she hissed, each word a venomous dart. She stood up, brushing at the stain with disgust, as if he had contaminated her with some foul disease. "Ms. Vance, I am so incredibly sorry. It was an accident." "Your bag," Liam began, his face pale with shock and dread. "My bag," she screeched, her voice attracting the attention of everyone in the lounge. "You are blaming my property for your clumsiness? Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know what this blouse costs? It's more than you make in a month, probably a year." She snatched the half-empty pot of coffee from the table beside hers. It was still hot, steam ghosting from its spout. Liam's eyes widened. He took a step back, a primal instinct of self-preservation kicking in. "Let me show you what it feels like to be inconvenienced," she snarled, and with a flick of her wrist, she threw the remaining coffee directly at his chest. The heat was a searing shock, soaking through his thin uniform and scalding his skin. He cried out, stumbling backward, clutching his chest as pain exploded across it. The lounge fell into a stunned, dead silence. Humiliation, hot and sharp, was a far worse burn than the coffee. He could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on him, not with pity, but with the morbid curiosity of spectators at a public flogging. His manager, a perpetually nervous man named Mr. Davies, scurried over. "Ms. Vance, is everything all right?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the powerful CEO, completely ignoring the injured man, gasping for breath. "No, it is not all right," Isabella spat, dropping the empty pot onto the carpet with a dull thud. "Fire him. I don't want to see his pathetic face ever again. If he is still employed here when I return from Zurich, I will personally buy this airport and turn it into a dog park." Without another glance at Liam, she grabbed her briefcase, her assistant scrambling behind her, and stormed out towards the tarmac, where her gleaming Gulfstream G650ER waited, its engines already whining in anticipation. Liam stood there, coffee dripping from his shirt, the pain in his chest a dull throb compared to the crushing weight of despair. Fired. Just like that. Another job gone, another lifeline to his daughter's future, severed by the casual cruelty of a woman who wouldn't even remember his face tomorrow. He looked down at his trembling hands, the burn already starting to blister. How was he going to tell Lily? The manager, Mr. Davies, offered no sympathy. He handed Liam his final paycheck in a crumpled envelope, his eyes darting around nervously as if afraid Isabella Vance's ghost might still be lingering. "You understand, I have no choice," he mumbled, not quite meeting Liam's gaze. "She's one of our most important clients." "I understand," Liam said, the words tasting like ash. "I understand that my livelihood is less important than her blouse." He didn't wait for a reply. He walked slowly to the small staff locker room, the smell of burnt coffee and his own failure clinging to him. He peeled off the stained uniform, the fabric sticking painfully to the raw skin on his chest. He winced, pulling on his worn t-shirt and jacket. He was just another piece of invisible, disposable help, a ghost in the machine of the wealthy. As he was tying his shoelaces, a frantic energy began to seep into the quiet atmosphere of the terminal. He could hear raised voices from the tarmac, the distinct tone of panic cutting through the air. A young woman from the ground crew rushed past the locker room door, her face pale. "Get a medic to Gate 4. Now, it's Captain Henderson." Liam's head snapped up. Gate 4 was where the Vance Global jet was parked. He felt a strange cold knot tighten in his stomach. He stepped out into the corridor, his own problems momentarily forgotten. Through the large plate glass windows overlooking the runway, he could see a small crowd gathered near the cockpit stairs of the Gulfstream. An ambulance was racing across the tarmac, its lights flashing silently. Arthur, Isabella Vance's harried young assistant, burst back into the terminal, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, she doesn't understand. We have to take off. The deal in Zurich is in 6 hours. Find another pilot." "What do you mean there's no one?" "Check the charter lists. Check NetJets. Check anywhere." Liam moved closer, drawn by a force he couldn't explain. He overheard 2 ground crew members talking in hushed, urgent tones. Massive stroke, they think, just as he was finishing the pre-flight. Lucky it didn't happen 10 minutes later in the air. Poor bastard. Is he still breathing when they took him out? But he's not flying anywhere today. And with this storm front moving in, no one else is either. The whole airport's going to be grounded in an hour. Liam's blood ran cold. A storm, a pilot down. He knew that feeling, the sudden violent vacuum when the chain of command is broken. Isabella Vance appeared at the terminal door, her face a thundercloud. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice echoing in the suddenly quiet space. "Why are we not moving?" "Arthur." "Ms. Vance," the assistant stammered, lowering his phone. "Captain Henderson has had a medical emergency. He's incapacitated. They've taken him to the hospital." "Incapacitated?" she repeated, the word foreign and unacceptable to her. "Then get me another pilot, now." "We're trying, Ms. Vance," Arthur said, his voice trembling. "But there's no one available on such short notice who is type-rated for the G650. And a major weather system is moving in. The tower just issued a ground stop for all outbound traffic in 30 minutes. We're out of time." "I don't accept that," Isabella seethed, her hands clenched into fists. "That deal is worth $9 billion. My entire quarter depends on it. I will not be stopped by an incompetent pilot and some bad weather." She began pacing like a caged panther, her fury radiating in waves. Her empire, her control, her entire world was built on the principle that her will was absolute. And now, a simple twist of fate and meteorology was threatening to bring it all crashing down. She was trapped. Liam stood by the window, watching the rain begin to streak the glass. He saw the beautiful, powerful machine sitting on the tarmac, a symbol of everything he wasn't. Wealth, power, freedom. But he also saw something else. He saw the specific sweep of its wings, the configuration of the Rolls-Royce engines, the precise angle of the T-tail. He knew that plane. He knew every rivet, every hydraulic line, every circuit breaker. He had more hours in a cockpit like that than Captain Henderson probably had in his entire career. He took a deep breath, the air burning his lungs. An idea, insane and audacious, began to form in his mind. He looked at the crumpled paycheck in his hand. He thought of Lily, of the surgeon who had told him, "We're running out of options, Mr. O'Connell." He had nothing left to lose. And Isabella Vance was about to lose everything. He started walking towards her. As Liam approached the whirlwind of fury that was Isabella Vance, her assistant, Arthur, stepped in his path. "Sir, you can't be here. This is a private area." He recognized Liam instantly. His eyes flickered down to the dark stain on Liam's shirt. "You're the waiter. You were fired. You need to leave." "I need to speak with her," Liam said, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside him. "That's not going to happen," Arthur said, trying to sound authoritative, but mostly just sounding scared. "What is it now, Arthur?" Isabella snapped, turning on them. Her eyes narrowed when she saw Liam. A look of pure disgust twisted her features. "You. I told them to get rid of you. Are you so stupid you can't even follow the simple instruction to disappear?" Liam ignored her insults. He looked past her, through the window at the Gulfstream, tail number N45VG. "You've got a problem," he said, his voice calm and even. "Your pilot is down, a level 4 storm is closing in from the northwest, and you have less than 20 minutes before the tower grounds everything until morning. You're not getting to Zurich." Isabella laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "And you're what? An amateur meteorologist now, in addition to being a terrible waiter? Get out of my sight before I have security throw you out." "The ground crew chief is Marcus Thorne," Liam continued, his eyes still fixed on the jet. "He's a good man, but he's panicking. He's going to tell you to wait out the storm, but he knows that means you miss your window. Your co-pilot, a kid named Peterson, has less than 100 hours in this airframe. He's not rated to fly left seat, and certainly not in these conditions. He won't even be able to get the engines started without a senior captain's authorization." Isabella's mocking smile faltered. Arthur's jaw went slack. How could this disgraced waiter possibly know all of that? "Who are you?" Isabella asked, her voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a sliver of confusion. Liam finally turned his gaze from the aircraft and met hers. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes beyond the weary subservience she'd seen earlier. She saw a flicker of steel, a depth she couldn't comprehend. "I'm the man who's going to fly your plane to Zurich," he said simply. The statement hung in the air, so preposterous that for a moment no one spoke. Then Isabella let out another bark of laughter, this one laced with genuine disbelief. "You? You can't carry a coffee cup without spilling it, and you think you can fly a $65 million aircraft? Have you lost your mind? Your jet is a Gulfstream G650ER, Liam said, his voice taking on a new cadence, crisp and professional. Powered by 2 Rolls-Royce BR725 engines, each producing 17,000 pounds of thrust. Maximum cruising speed of Mach 0.925. Service ceiling of 51,000 feet. The storm you're worried about tops out at 42,000. We can climb over most of it. The real problem is the wind shear on takeoff, which will be extreme. You'll need to execute a maximum performance climb profile, flaps at 20, rotate speed of 135 knots, and be prepared to counter a potential microburst within the first 1,000 feet. He paused, letting the information sink in. The technical jargon, delivered with such casual authority, was like a series of sonic booms in the silent terminal. Arthur was staring at him with wide-eyed awe. Isabella was speechless, her arrogance finally cracking. "I know the pre-flight checklist by heart," Liam said, pressing his advantage. "I know that the auxiliary power unit has a finicky starter on this model that requires a 2-second prime. I know that the avionics suite is the Honeywell Primus Epic and that its flight management system can be programmed for a transatlantic route in under 4 minutes. I also know that if you don't get in that cockpit right now, your $9 billion deal is going to evaporate." He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open. Inside, behind a cloudy plastic window, was a pilot's license, and behind that, a military ID. "Liam O'Connell," he said, holding it out for her to see. "Former Major, United States Air Force, call sign Spectre. 4,000 hours in heavy transport jets, 1,500 of those as an aircraft commander in combat zones. I also hold a civilian airline transport pilot license, with a current and valid type rating for the G650. Now, are we going to stand here and talk, or are you going to let me get you to Zurich?" Isabella stared at the ID, then back at the man in the coffee-stained t-shirt. It was impossible. It was insane. But the details he'd recited, the sheer confidence in his voice. It was all terrifyingly real. Every instinct she had, every carefully constructed prejudice, screamed that this was a mistake. But her other, more powerful instinct, the one that had built an empire, told her that this was her only chance. The man she had humiliated just an hour ago now held the fate of her company in his hands. "Arthur," she said, her voice a strained whisper, "get him a uniform, and clear it with the tower. Tell them Captain O'Connell is taking command." The air inside the Gulfstream's cockpit was thick with tension. The young co-pilot, Peterson, looked at Liam with a mixture of suspicion and awe. Arthur had found a spare pilot's uniform in a locker, and while it was a bit tight in the shoulders, the transformation was staggering. The tired, defeated waiter was gone. In his place sat a man who seemed fused with the captain's chair, his hands moving over the complex array of buttons and switches with an innate, fluid familiarity. "Run the pre-flight checklist, challenge and response," Liam ordered, his voice crisp and authoritative. Peterson, startled into action, fumbled with his clipboard. Oxygen pressure?" Peterson stammered. "Checked and verified. 1850 psi." Liam responded instantly, his eyes scanning the overhead panel. "Hydraulic quantity?" "Checked. Systems A and B at 100%. APU?" "Priming for 2 seconds. Now, engaging starter." The auxiliary power unit whirred to life with a smooth hum, exactly as Liam had predicted. Peterson's eyes widened slightly. They ran through the rest of the checklist, Liam's responses coming before Peterson could even finish the questions. He knew the aircraft. He knew it cold. Through the cockpit door, Liam could see Isabella Vance strapping herself into a plush leather seat in the main cabin. Her face was a pale, unreadable mask, her usual iron control completely gone. She was a passenger now, her fate entirely in the hands of the man she had tried to ruin. "Westchester Tower, this is November 45, Victor Golf." Liam's voice was calm and steady as he spoke into the headset. "Ready for taxi. Runway 16. We have the latest ATIS information. We're aware of the wind shear advisory." 45 Victor Golf, you are cleared to taxi. The controller's voice crackled back. "Be advised, you are the last aircraft cleared for departure. We are issuing a ground stop effective in 10 minutes. Godspeed." Liam's hands moved with practiced grace, guiding the powerful jet away from the terminal. The rain was coming down in sheets now, lashing against the cockpit windscreen. The wind buffeted the plane even on the ground. "This is going to be a rough ride," Liam said to Peterson, his eyes locked on the runway ahead. "When I call for it, I want you to monitor engine performance and call out our airspeed. Do not get distracted. Understand?" "Yes, Captain," Peterson said, his voice firming with a newfound confidence inspired by Liam's command. Liam lined the jet up on the runway. He could feel the immense power of the Rolls-Royce engines vibrating through the frame. He took a deep breath, pushing aside the image of Lily in her hospital bed. The thought of his own burning chest, the memory of Isabella's sneering face. All that mattered now was the next 10 minutes. "Tower, Victor Golf is ready for takeoff." November 45. Victor Golf winds 190 at 25, gusting to 40. Cleared for immediate takeoff, runway 16. "Cleared for takeoff," Liam confirmed. He pushed the throttles forward smoothly. The engines roared to life, a deafening crescendo of power that pressed him back into his seat. The jet surged forward, accelerating down the wet runway at an incredible rate. "Airspeed alive," Peterson called out. 80 knots. V1, rotate." Liam pulled back gently on the yoke. The nose of the $65 million aircraft lifted off the ground, followed a second later by the main gear. They were airborne, and then all hell broke loose. Just as the wheels left the pavement, a violent gust of wind slammed into the plane from the side. The left wing dipped sharply, and an alarm blared through the cockpit. "Wind shear! Wind shear!" In the cabin, Isabella was thrown against her seatbelt. A scream escaped her lips, swallowed by the roar of the engines and the storm. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the armrests. This was it. This was how it ended, in a fiery crash at the hands of a man she'd abused. In the cockpit, Liam didn't flinch. His training, honed in the violent skies over Afghanistan, took over. "Max power," he commanded. His feet danced on the rudder pedals, countering the vicious crosswind. His hands were a blur on the yoke, keeping the wings level as the plane bucked like a wild animal. Positive rate, gear up. Gear up, Peterson confirmed, his voice tight with fear. The jet clawed its way into the sky, fighting for every inch of altitude. Rain hammered the windscreen so hard it was like flying through a waterfall. Warning lights flashed on the console. "We've got ice accretion on the number 2 engine inlet," Peterson shouted over the alarms. "Activate anti-ice," Liam ordered, his eyes never leaving the instruments. "Climbing through 3,000. We need to get above this mess." He pushed the jet harder, demanding every ounce of performance from the engines. For 15 agonizing minutes, they fought the storm. The turbulence was relentless, shaking the aircraft so violently it felt like it would tear apart. In the cabin, Isabella had her eyes squeezed shut, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in decades. Her wealth, her power, her entire identity had been stripped away. She was just a terrified woman in a metal tube, utterly helpless. She could hear the calm, commanding voice of the pilot over the intercom, issuing instructions to his co-pilot, a beacon of impossible serenity in the heart of chaos. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the violent shaking eased. The deafening roar of the rain against the fuselage subsided to a hiss. Liam had found a narrow corridor through the worst of the weather front. A few moments later, they broke through the top layer of clouds into a calm, surreal world of brilliant sunshine and deep blue sky. Below them, the storm was a churning carpet of angry grey clouds. Liam leveled the plane off at 45,000 feet. He throttled back the engines to a steady, reassuring hum. He turned to his co-pilot. "You did good, Peterson. Take a breath." Peterson let out a long, shuddering exhale he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Captain, I've never seen anything like that. That was incredible." Liam just nodded. He keyed the intercom. His voice, calm and professional, filled the silent cabin. "Ms. Vance, this is Captain O'Connell. We are through the worst of the weather and have reached our cruising altitude. Our estimated flight time to Zurich is 6 hours and 40 minutes. Please feel free to move about the cabin." Isabella opened her eyes. She looked out the window at the impossible blue sky. They were safe. He had done it. The clumsy waiter, the man she had scolded and fired, had just flown through the mouth of hell and saved her life. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless and shaking for an entirely different reason. The rest of the flight passed in an unnerving calm. The Gulf Stream sliced through the stratosphere, a silver dart suspended between the deep blue above and the blanket of clouds below. In the cabin, Arthur brought Isabella a bottle of water, his hand still trembling slightly. She took it but didn't drink. Her mind was replaying the violent takeoff, the terrifying lurches and groans of the aircraft, and the steady, unwavering voice that had guided them through it. She had built her empire on the ability to read people, to assess their value and their weaknesses in an instant. She had looked at Liam O'Connell and seen a failure, a clumsy, disposable cog in a machine she owned. She had judged him, condemned him, and discarded him without a second thought. And she had been catastrophically wrong. Her entire worldview, a rigid structure built on wealth, power, and status, was beginning to crumble. The man in the coffee-stained t-shirt was more competent, more skilled, and more composed under pressure than any of the high-powered executives on her board. He had held her life, her future, and the fate of her multi-billion-dollar deal in his hands, and he had not faltered. The power dynamic had been inverted so completely it left her dizzy. As the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the cabin, the coast of Europe appeared on the horizon. The descent into Zurich was as smooth as the takeoff had been violent. Liam handled the jet with the delicate precision of a surgeon, the wheels kissing the runway so gently that Isabella barely felt the moment they made contact. As the jet taxied towards the private terminal, a silence fell over the cabin. The deal was saved. Her life was saved. And now came the reckoning. The engines spooled down and the seatbelt sign pinged off. Arthur began gathering their bags, carefully avoiding Isabella's gaze. She unbuckled her belt, but remained seated, her legs feeling strangely weak. After a few minutes, the cockpit door opened. Liam emerged, No longer Captain O'Connell, the commander of the skies, but once again the man in the ill-fitting uniform. He looked tired, the adrenaline of the flight having faded, leaving behind the bone-deep weariness she had seen in the lounge. He started to walk past her towards the main cabin door. "Wait," she said, her voice hoarse. He stopped and turned to face her. His expression was neutral, unreadable. There was no triumph in his eyes, no "I told you so." There was just a quiet dignity that made her feel small. "That was," she began, struggling for words. "That was remarkable." "It's my job," he said simply. She reached for her purse, her old instincts kicking in. Money was the language she understood. It solved everything. "I want to compensate you for your services. Name your price. $100,000. 200? Make it $500,000. For your troubles." A flicker of something, disappointment perhaps, crossed Liam's face. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You still don't get it, do you?" He took a step closer, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, he let her see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. "You think you can throw money at this and make it go away? You think you can write a check and absolve yourself of what you did? What I did was a reaction to—" She started, but the words died in her throat. She had no defense. "Let me tell you what you did," Liam said, his voice low and intense, cutting through the cabin's quiet hum. "You threw scalding coffee on me. Not by accident, on purpose, to make a point. You did it in front of a room full of people because you needed to feel powerful, and I was an easy target. You cost me my job, a job I desperately needed." He took a breath, his composure wavering for a moment. "I have a daughter, Ms. Vance. Her name is Lily. She's 7 years old and she's sick. Very sick. She needs an operation that costs more than I'll ever make in my lifetime. That job you took from me, that was for her. Every humiliating hour I spent serving people like you was to keep a roof over her head, to pay for the medicine that keeps her stable. So no, $500,000 doesn't fix this." Isabella stared at him, the story of his daughter landing like a punch to the gut. The casual cruelty she had displayed now seemed monstrous, unforgivable. "So what do you want?" she whispered, the question genuine. Her money was useless here. Her power was gone. She was completely at his mercy. "I don't want your money," Liam said, his voice firm. "I want you to understand. I want you to feel, for just 1 second, what it's like to have no power. To be at the mercy of someone else's whim." He looked her dead in the eye. "Here are my terms. First, you are going to fly back to Westchester with me, and you are going to walk into that Onyx lounge, and you are going to apologize. Not to me, you are going to apologize to the manager you intimidated and the staff you treated like furniture. And you are going to personally ensure that I am rehired with full back pay." He wasn't finished. "Second, your company, Vance Global, has a charitable foundation. I've seen it in the news. You are going to have that foundation contact New York Presbyterian Hospital. You are going to speak to Dr. Aris Thorne in the pediatric cardiology department. And you are going to tell him that the Vance Foundation will be covering the full cost of Lily O'Connell's experimental heart surgery and all associated aftercare. No questions, no press releases, you're just going to do it." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, but it carried more weight than any shout. "And finally, before I fly you 1 more inch, you are going to look at me. Not at the waiter, not at the pilot, but at me. And you are going to say, 'Thank you, Captain O'Connell, for saving my life.'" This was the price, not money, but humility. Not a transaction, but a penance. He was demanding that she dismantle the very ego that had fueled her entire life. He was forcing her to kneel, not physically, but emotionally and spiritually, before the man she had deemed worthless. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint whine of the jet's cooling systems. Her entire world had been reduced to a single choice. Isabella Vance sat frozen in her seat, the weight of Liam's demands pressing down on her. Every fiber of her being, conditioned by years of dominance and control, rebelled against the idea of submission. Apologize? To service staff? Fund a stranger's life-altering surgery? Utter words of gratitude to this man? It was unthinkable. It was a complete surrender of the power she had spent her life accumulating. But as she looked at him, at the quiet, unyielding strength in his eyes, she saw the futility of her resistance. He held all the cards. He had saved her from a storm that would have destroyed her. He had delivered her to a deal that would define her legacy. And he had done it all after she had treated him with a cruelty she now found difficult to stomach. The reflection staring back at her in the polished cabin wall was not of a powerful CEO, but of a hollow, arrogant woman. The fight went out of her. The iron mask she wore cracked, and for the first time in years, a genuine, painful emotion showed on her face. It was shame. "All right," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to speak louder, to meet his gaze. "I will do it. I will do all of it." Liam simply nodded, his expression unchanging. He had won, but he took no pleasure in it. This wasn't about victory, it was about justice. A small, personal justice in a world that rarely offered it. The trip to Zurich was a blur of meetings. Isabella closed the deal, but her focus was elsewhere. The flight back was a long, silent ordeal. When they landed at Westchester, the true test began. As she had promised, she summoned Mr. Davies and his staff to the Onyx Lounge, paying them handsomely for the late-night inconvenience. They stood in a loose semicircle, their faces a mixture of fear and contempt. Liam stood near the back, a silent sentinel. Isabella, looking smaller than ever in her power suit, stood in the center of the room. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of a refrigerator. "2 days ago," she began, her voice tight and strained, "I behaved in a way that was unacceptable." She looked at the faces staring back at her, not with awe, but with cold judgment. "I was abusive to your colleague, and I intimidated your manager." She swallowed hard. "I am sorry." The word hung in the air, thin and inadequate. Mr. Davies, emboldened by her public humiliation, took a step forward. "Sorry, you scolded him and cost him his job. You threatened to turn this place into a dog park." "Sorry doesn't quite cover it, Ms. Vance." Isabella flinched as if struck. "You're right," she conceded, her voice cracking. "It doesn't. My actions were monstrous. I offer no excuse, only my deepest apology." She turned to Liam. "Mr. O'Connell will be reinstated, with back pay and a significant bonus for the distress I caused." Her eyes pleaded with him for a sign, any sign, but he gave her nothing. Finally, she faced him directly, the words of his last demand catching in her throat like hooks. "Thank you, Captain O'Connell, for saving my life." The sentence came out as a choked whisper. She turned and fled the room, the sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor, the only sound in her retreat. The next day, the Vance Foundation made a multi-million-dollar, no-strings-attached donation to the pediatric cardiology wing of New York Presbyterian. A week later, Lily O'Connell underwent successful surgery. 2 months passed. Liam was now the chief pilot of the Vance Global Flight Department, a position created for him with a salary that secured Lily's future forever. Isabella Vance was his sole passenger, a prisoner in her own $65 million jet. She was polite, distant, and utterly broken. One afternoon, Liam sat in a quiet diner miles from the airport, a framed photo of a smiling, vibrant Lily propped against the salt shaker. Across from him, sipping a black coffee, sat a man who looked tanned and relaxed. It was Captain Henderson, the pilot who had supposedly suffered a massive stroke. "So," Henderson said, a grin playing on his lips. "How's the new boss?" "Quiet," Liam replied, a rare smile touching his own face. "Keeps to herself. I think she's terrified of me." "As she should be," Henderson chuckled, shaking his head in residual disbelief. "You know, when you called me about that job waiting tables 6 months ago, I thought you were crazy. But you said to trust you. You said she was just as bad as her old man, Marcus Vance." "Worse," Liam said, his voice turning cold. "Her father used predatory loans and corporate raiding to bankrupt my dad's charter company, O'Connell Air. He didn't just ruin him financially, he did it with a smile. I remember him coming to our house with the foreclosure notice. He looked at my father, a man who had built his business from nothing, and told him, 'Some men are born to fly, and others are born to own the sky. Know your place.'" Henderson let out a low whistle. The apple didn't fall far from that poisoned tree. I never forgot what you told me back in the service. If you ever got a chance to get payback, you'd take it. And you did, Spectre. You magnificent bastard, you did, Henderson said, his eyes glinting with admiration. I have to admit, faking that stroke was the best acting I've done in my life. The paramedics that the ground crew chief, Marcus Thorne, called in were old army buddies of ours. They sold it perfectly. Thorne was in on it too. His first job was as a mechanic for your dad. He was happy to help. He had the whole ground crew running in circles, swearing up and down that every other type-rated pilot in a 100-mile radius was grounded or unreachable. The storm wasn't just a lucky break, Liam admitted, swirling his coffee. I was tracking that weather system for a week with military-grade meteorological software. I knew it would hit right during her departure window. It was the final piece. The pilot, the storm, the lack of replacements. It wasn't just a perfect storm, it was a manufactured one. It removed any possibility of her finding an alternative. It boxed her in completely. It wasn't luck, it was a plan, Henderson corrected him. A damn brilliant one. You spent months getting me hired as her pilot, building a history. You took that humiliating job, biding your time, waiting for the one thing you knew you could count on, her unbridled arrogance. You put yourself in her path, knowing she couldn't resist swatting at a fly. You saw an opportunity to not only get justice for your father, but to secure Lily's future. You put the pieces in place, and when she showed her true colors with that coffee pot, you just knocked the first domino. Liam looked out the window at the passing cars. She paid for Lily's heart. I'll give her that. You didn't give her a choice, Henderson reminded him. You built a perfect trap out of her own cruelty. Now she's your passenger for life. Every time she steps on that plane, every time she sees your face in that captain's uniform, she's not seeing her pilot. She's seeing the waiter she tried to destroy. The man who owns her now. That's a prison no amount of money can buy you out of. Liam took a sip of his own coffee. It was hot, but it didn't burn. It tasted like victory. That evening, Isabella sat in her penthouse office, the glittering skyline of Manhattan spread before her like a carpet of diamonds. It was a view that used to make her feel powerful, a master of the universe she surveyed. Now it just felt empty. She hadn't been able to truly focus since the incident. The $9 billion deal had been a success on paper, but the victory felt hollow, stolen. On her desk, a tablet glowed. She'd had her security team run a deep background check on Liam O'Connell. The report was infuriatingly perfect. A decorated Air Force major. A hero, according to his commendations. Flawless flight records. Not a single black mark that could give her leverage. Nothing she could use to break the invisible chains he had wrapped around her. Frustrated, she typed a new search query, O'Connell Air. The results were old, archived business articles from the late 90s. She saw photos of smaller jets, articles praising a small but respected charter company. And then she found it, a series of articles detailing a hostile takeover. She read about predatory lending practices, a leveraged buyout that forced the founder into bankruptcy. At the bottom of the article, a name in bold, Marcus Vance, her father. A cold dread, heavier and more profound than the fear she'd felt in the storm, settled over her. She scrolled through the images until she found a photo of the founder of O'Connell Air, a man with kind eyes and a proud smile, standing next to one of his planes. The caption read, Daniel O'Connell. It all clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't about a spilled coffee, it wasn't a random encounter. This was a ghost from her father's past, a debt she never knew she owed, coming to collect with interest. The waiter, the pilot, the storm, it was all a stage, and she had played her part perfectly. The humiliation in the lounge, the terror in the sky, the forced apology, it was all part of a script written decades ago by her own family's greed. The next morning, she boarded the G650ER for a flight to Chicago. The cabin felt less like a luxury suite and more like a cage. Liam was in the cockpit, his back to her as he went through the pre-flight check. She noticed something new on the lapel of his crisp pilot's uniform, a small silver pin shaped like a soaring albatross. It was elegant, understated, and unfamiliar. "Everything looks good, Captain?" she asked, her voice a hollow echo of its former power. "All systems are green, Ms. Vance," he replied, not turning around. "We're cleared for takeoff." She retreated to her seat, the silence of the cabin pressing in on her. Her assistant, Arthur, now perpetually timid in Liam's presence, silently handed her a tablet with the morning's news briefs. She scrolled absently, her mind elsewhere, until a photo in a throwback Thursday business feature caught her eye. It was from an aviation conference in 1998. A younger, triumphant-looking Marcus Vance was shaking hands with another man. The other man was Daniel O'Connell. And pinned to the lapel of his blazer was the exact same silver albatross. The logo of O'Connell Air. Her breath caught in her chest. It was a message, a final silent turn of the knife. He wanted her to know, he wanted her to understand the full scope of his victory, to realize that she was not just paying for her own sins, but for the sins of her father as well. The jet's engines roared to life, pressing her back into the plush leather. She looked out the window, but she didn't see the runway falling away. She saw her reflection, a pale, trapped woman, and she understood that this was her life now. A gilded cage at 50,000 feet, with her family's ghost as the pilot. As the jet leveled off, Liam's voice, calm and impossibly distant, came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Vance. We'll be arriving in Chicago shortly."